So, dear ladies, gentlemen, I'm very glad to meet you here at a public lecture at Buryat State University. I wish there were more people here, more students, but anyway, we are to start. The topic for today's lecture is social or sociolinguistic competence in foreign language teaching. And here there are points that we are going, if not to discuss, but just to, I'm going to explain, and they are sociolinguistics and teaching second language or languages, the European framework, levels of language learning. The third point is going to be the sociolinguistic competence as a constituent part of the communicative competence. And we are going to finish with the last item, and it is the pragmatics of the sociolinguistic competence, and from my point of view is the most interesting. The first question of our work for today. Those students or people who are interested in teaching methods are informed by now that sociolinguistics is connected with teaching methods. So it is one of the disciplines, the achievements and the theories of which are used by educators, methodologists, teachers, and just teachers in the end. And what is sociolinguistics in general? The most, or the plainest way to describe it is the following. Sociolinguistics is the relationship between language use and social factors. The more scientific way to do it is, sociolinguistics is the descriptive study of the effect of all aspects of society, including cultural norms, expectations, and context on the way language is used. In other words, sociolinguistics deals with sociology, with the sociologically oriented approach where the norms of language are, the norms of language, use are in the focus of attention. In general, sociolinguists or sociolinguists study and analyze language and society, language and culture, language and interaction, and language and its variation. So, if the sociolinguists study and analyze language and society, they study nations, ethnic groups, different minorities, and it is quite clear that the language of the British Isles is quite different from that of the United States, and the Londoners, or just Londoners, speak the English language than, for example, the natives of Manchester or Liverpool do it. So, if sociolinguists study language and culture, they do it in the perspective to fetch out the mutual interaction of human cultural achievements into the language. So, everything is everything is studied here. I mean, the art in each of its branch, whether it is architecture and language, painting and language, what else? Even modern computer games or any other achievements. So everything that is connected with the human production in the life of people. So language and interaction. So here, sociolinguists study and analyze group or individual interactions. And again, the mutual interaction is in the focus here. What is more important and most interesting for teachers of a second language is certainly language and its variation. And this is the exact last item that is directly connected with teaching methods of teaching. Namely, the scholars explore how people vary the language they use in different social contexts. So all that means that on the one hand, sociolinguistics studies how language varieties differ between groups separated by certain social variables, and on the other hand, this branch of knowledge studies how creation and adherence to these rules is used to categorize individuals in social and socio-economic classes. We all understand that as the usage of language varies from place to place, language usage also varies among social classes and among social groups. My next slides are devoted to pioneers in this branch of knowledge and in sociolinguistics exactly. William Labov, he is an American, and he is employed as a professor of linguistics in the linguistic department of the University of Pennsylvania. He pursues researches in sociolinguistics, language change, and dialectology. The next person I would like to draw your attention to is Noam Chomsky. Nowadays he resides in Massachusetts, travels a lot, and gives lectures on politics. It was he who introduced the notion of communicative competence, considering it as language knowledge mostly. The next person is Dale Hymes. It was he who proposed the notion of communicative competence in language teaching and in language learning. And it has become one of the most important notions in teaching methods nowadays. John Joseph Gumpertz was the most of his career a professor of the University of California, and he made researches on code switching and on conversational interactions. The next slide is devoted to modern and pioneer sociolinguists in the United States, Europe, and here in the Russian Federation. So, and I think it's high time to answer the question why it is so important, this very branch of knowledge, I mean sociolinguistics, when we, teachers and educators and just learners of foreign languages, pay attention to it. So, trying to explain it, I would like you to watch an episode from an American movie which is entitled William and Kate, and it was shot in 2011, and it is about, just a moment, it is about the relationship between Prince William, it is about the relationship between Prince William and Catherine Middleton. So the scene is set in St. Andrew's College in Scotland, where Prince William has come to get his first higher education. So will you please watch this episode and make notice how it is necessary to greet and get acquainted with a person, someone from a royal family, and someone, if he is or she is an ordinary person, okay? So, will you please switch?
Come in. Welcome, my lord. I see you have received my CV. It's not much, but it's all mine.
Yes. I don't understand.
Sir, I'm applying for the position as your wingman.
My wingman?
Your wingman, your co-pilot, first mate. I come bearing liquid bribes. Name's Ian Musgrove, Your Royal Highness. I live right next door, one more away. I'm at your beck and call, day or night, drunk or sober. If you've had too many girls in your room and you need help, I'm your man.
I'm women. There's no need to be so formal. And why do I need a wingman?
Come with me.
And the slides, please, okay? So, can you comment? What have you seen here? Or it is rather difficult? Difficult. Well, I will help you. So, you have just seen how it is necessary to greet a member of a royal family, right? To greet and get acquainted. And you remember those long phrases and the addresser, my lord. I see you have received my CV, my lord, right?
Yeah.
So, different languages are used while talking to different people. And certainly, we must differentiate when we address to some from the royal family or to just simple people. And this is not the language that determines it. It is the situational context that determines it. And people must, while talking and communicating, they must understand it. And here we have seen, certainly it was a joke, but anyway, in the first part of the episode, it was presented as a greeting and introducing with the royal family, with a member of the royal family, and later it was just Prince William acted himself as a simple, ordinary person. So, and that is, from my point of view, explains how and why sociolinguistics connected with such applied branch of knowledge as method of teaching. And the next point, and at the end of each part of our lecture, I would like to deduce some main ideas of this lecture. And the first one is, people speak different languages in any language. Even within one culture and even within one ethnic group, people choose various linguistic ways to communicate. The next point of our discussion is the European framework and levels of language learning. So, why did people all over the globe start thinking and then working out so-called levels of language learning? So, I suppose that if you think it over, you can give the answer yourselves. The European borders practically vanished in the second part of the 20th century, and as a consequence of this change, people began migrating practically like birds within the whole European community. They studied in France. They finished high school somewhere in France. They traveled along the whole Europe. Then they took their higher education somewhere in Belgium and worked finally in Germany or in Austria. So one and the same language or one and the same languages are used within and between countries nowadays. And today, a European citizen doesn't speak even two languages. He or she speaks more than two languages, even within a family, one family. And so this is called multilingualism. And one of the things that made it possible to travel, to work, to study in different places in Europe, certainly it is the language knowledge. But it's not only the language knowledge, but the knowledge of language skills. And therefore, skills, they are reading, listening, writing, and speaking, certainly. Right away, could you please look back and refresh in your memory the levels of foreign language learning? Can you? If you can't, the common European framework will help you. Be sure. In internet, you can search and find out everything about this document and the document itself. So what is it? The common European framework is a guideline used to describe achievements of learners of foreign languages. The common European framework, which is abbreviated as CFR, divides learners into three broad divisions that can be divided into 6 levels each. So each broad division is at least subdivided into 2. And you see, the basic user is A1 and A2, and if you remember modern students' books of English, for example, you will see that each of them coincides with this beginner level, or elementary, or intermediate, or upper intermediate, and so on and so forth. So, and it is, you must understand and remember that it's a common European framework, and each level, by the way, the last level is the first one is a basic user, the last one is a proficient user. But C2 is a mastery level. It is practically the same as the level of a native user, but it's not. In general, it's not, but mostly it is. To achieve it, people have to live in those countries more than 1 or 2 years, I suppose. So, each level has descriptors which describe what a learner is supposed to be able to do in reading, listening, speaking, and writing at each level. And the next, in turn, deduction for today's lecture is that foreign language teaching and learning is a gaining process. And the key word in this deduction is, I suppose, a gaining. It is a gaining process. And the results of such process are gradually achieved and controlled with the help of the common European framework. My next point of today's plan is the social-linguistic competence as a constituent part of the communicative competence itself. So, here there are people who have been taking teaching methods, and you understand that teachers don't teach language, right? We have discussed it today. Teachers teachers do what? Sorry, they teach not the language but the language skills, and therefore, as we have enumerated. And as for students, they don't learn language. They obtain a certain level of language that is possible, or that gives them possibility to speak a target language fluently. And now, in Russian, you certainly know what the communicative competence is, and in English I have tried to formulate it. It is an intellectual, creative, individual ability to perform conscious intercultural communication with both with native speakers and learners the same language as a second one. In the context of teaching methods, this competence is achieved and exercised through deliberately arranged interaction. The number of the constituents or constituent parts of communicative competence just varies considerably, and even nowadays none of the educators or linguists or methodologists can't point out the exact number of these parts of the communicative competence. And I will remind to you and to myself that first it was Noam Chomsky who introduced the notion of the communicative competence. But it was Del Hymes who emphasized the idea of sub-competencies within the communicative one and brought in the social rules of the language usage. And he differentiated 4 aspects of the communicative competence: the grammatical one, the socio-cultural, the discourse competence, and a strategic one. Sorry, he did it in the middle of the last century. It's needless to explain that the grammatical one deals with language itself: phonetics, grammar, constructions, and vocabulary, plus language skills anyway. The socio-cultural competence comprises definite cultural knowledge of any country, including traditions, geography, religion, history, values, and all of them are of vital importance, certainly, for a successful communication. The discourse competence is the competence which is connected with the production of both oral and written utterances of any length. Sometimes these utterances can be called texts, oral text or written texts. As for the strategic competence, it is the ability to complete the communication successfully by verbal or non-verbal means. About a decade later, other sociolinguists, Michael Cannell and Merrill Swain, developed their own structure of the communicative competence. And they supposed it consists of a grammatical one, sociolinguistic, strategic, and the discourse competence. So, by the way, these linguists underline the idea that individuals start to acquire sociolinguistic and strategic competences much earlier than a grammatical and the discourse ones. And it is quite understandable. Imagine an 18-month-old child. He understands that if he wants to eat, he has to sit on the chair, not on the table, right? And this is what is meant. So, the sociolinguistic and strategic competences that are connected with the social rules of behavior are required much earlier than grammatical, linguistic ones and discourse ones. And here it is, the sociolinguistic competence. And what is it, I wonder? The plainest way again to explain it, what is it? The sociolinguistic competence is the individual's knowledge of how to produce and understand language in social contexts. So, the sociolinguistic competence is the individual's knowledge of how to produce and understand language in social contexts. Many other linguists and educators and methodologists have studied the nature of the communicative competence, and each of them implies something meaningful and prominent. And as I major in teaching methods here in Russia, I can't but mention the name of Russian distinguished educators, whose researches, anyway, are based on the achievements of European and American sociolinguists. So, and it is certainly Ines Lvovna Bim, to whom I would like to draw your attention to. So, besides all of her achievements, Ines Lvovna was one of the authors of the Russian Standard in Foreign Languages for Secondary School, where it is marked that communicative competence is subdivided into the following: into the linguistic one, speech competence, socio-cultural, including social-linguistic ones, strategic competence, and a learning one. Sorry. So under the linguistic competence, the language itself is emphasized. If it is speech competence, it is the ability to use the language for oral and written communication. The strategic competence, it is the ability to achieve the success in communication with the help of all verbal and non-verbal ways or means. A learning competence includes the student's capability to learn the foreign language, and the elder students are, the more independent they must be in this process. Plus, learning competence also includes some skills to work with the language that help students to work with the language. And the last, but not least, it is the socio-cultural competence that in the Russian standard includes the social-linguistic competence. Why is it included? Anyone can ask and anyone can answer. Any language is a part of any culture, and that's why the social-linguistic competence is included into the socio-cultural one. And answering the question in general and in particular, what a social-linguistic competence is, I can't but specify the social-linguistic competence within the framework of sociolinguistics and intercultural approach in teaching languages. The sociolinguistic competence presupposes the following points. First of all, it presupposes sociocultural knowledge of language usage. This competence is associated with knowledge of style and conventions and speech behavior. Then, the sociolinguistic competence it presupposes the knowledge of discourse strategies to produce utterances or texts. Then, the sociolinguistic competence presupposes the knowledge of specific cultural rules and standards of a certain country. And first of all, social rules and of language context is meant here. Certainly, it also presupposes knowledge of non-verbal behavior. Besides, the sociolinguistic competence presupposes accomplishment of the communicative intention. Next, this competence presupposes comprehension of the communicative situation, where and how people speak, communicate, and interact and influence each other. Then, at the last point, we have decided that sociolinguistic competence presupposes contextual social status and role perception. Moreover, I can assure you that the sociolinguistic competence is essential when an individual enters a multilingual society. To summarize it, I'd like to conclude that the sociolinguistic competence doesn't only convey messages, but also conveys understanding and interpreting of social contexts around speakers. Everything mentioned above enabled me to formulate the definition of the sociolinguistic competence, and it is the ability to arrange one's speech behavior in accordance with the situation, place, intentions, social status and role of the participants as specified in the sociolinguistic norm and conventions of the certain nation or a society. Here I'm trying to underline the key words of the definition, where to arrange, first of all, means to establish the contact, to support the contact, to explicate and to terminate the conversation. If it is speech behavior, first of all, it is the process of correct language choice in verbal communication. I think quite understandable the notions of situation, place, intentions, maybe social status and role. And as for sociolinguistic norm and conventions, first of all, some rules and some social rules and social laws are underlined in language usage here. Now, I would like to take the handouts that I have prepared for you and to look at them. In that official document that was mentioned in the beginning of the lecture, the European Framework Levels of Language Learning, there is so-called sociolinguistic appropriateness, and you see the translation into Russian of it, Шкала социолингвистической правильности. And in this official document of the European Council, there are specified and fixed requirements to language learners according to sociolinguistic competence. And we're not going to read all of them, but I'd like to draw your attention to the first one, because it is the level of beginner, when children or any adult only starts learning any language. And at this level, he can only establish basic social contact by using the simplest everyday polite forms of greeting, farewells, introductions, saying please, thank you, and sorry, etc., and so on and so forth. So, the B1 level is very important, and I am trying now to explain why, because this is the level that must be achieved by every school leaver in the Russian Federation. And let's read. Let's try to find out what any language learner must be able to do. He or she can perform and respond to a wide range of language functions using their most common exponents in a neutral register. And besides, he or she is aware of the salient politeness conventions and acts appropriately. He or she is aware of and looks out for signs of the most significant differences between the customs, usages, attitudes, values, and beliefs prevalent in the community concerned, and those of his or her own. So, it is clearly demonstrated here that he can't understand everything, but he is aware of those differences, and he must look for different signs, trying to interpret those signs. As for the master level, look at it, mastery level. If it is practically a native user, he or she has a good command of idiomatic expressions and colloquialisms with awareness of connotative levels of meaning. Besides, he or she appreciates fully the sociolinguistic and sociocultural implications of language used by native speakers and can react accordingly. Besides, he or she can mediate effectively between speakers of the target language and that of his or her community of origin, taking account of sociocultural and sociolinguistic differences. My next deduction for today's lecture is that sociolinguistic competence is a structural element of the communicative competence within the sociocultural one. And if it is the communicative competence, I wanted to remind you that this is a linguistic one, the next is a speech competence, sociocultural including sociolinguistics, a strategic one, and the learning competence. The last, but from my point of view is the most interesting point of today's plan, is the pragmatics of the sociolinguistic competence. Some years ago, I couldn't but start thinking about the content or the subject matter of the sociolinguistic competence while foreign language teaching. I realized that it is necessary to teach students or pupils at school this competence, but it was the problem for me what exactly must learn and acquire learners or students while acquiring, for example, sociolinguistic competence. And it became rather natural and logical to come to a conclusion and to understand that sociolinguistics as a branch of knowledge overlaps to a considerable degree of pragmatics. And as it turned out later, both fields, pragmatics, pragmalinguistics, sociolinguistics, and teaching methods are historically closely related to linguistic anthropology. From a perspective of many sciences, communication is a very complicated process. Nobody can deny it. Communicative act is influenced by a number of some factors, and sometimes they are called extralinguistic factors. It is well known today that speech acts are determined by them. To puzzle out of what kind communication must be here and right now, right away, I suppose we should take into consideration where and how any communication takes place. To cut a long story short, it is the situation or the communicative situation that is under the study right away. A great number of scientists presume that in communicative foreign language teaching, the communicative situation is a condition of language acquisition. The communicative situation is any situation when two or more individuals interact by means of speech. It is the simplest and the plainest way to explain the communicative situation, but anyway, any situation between two or more individuals which interact and influence each other. In pragmalinguistics, among the constituent elements of the communicative situation, lots of components can be found. They are addressee and addresser, social status and role, the code, the theme of communication, the spheres where the language is used, the goal, speech form, speech behavior, dialects, different registers, etc. And after a detailed and a particular research, and having analyzed a variety of the constituent elements of the communicative situation, and certainly for the purposes of foreign language teaching, it became possible to shorten that list of those constituent parts of the communicative situation to the following. And it is certainly the goal of the purpose of communication. Then the place of communication comes. The social status of the speaker or speakers, the social role of the speakers, the relations between them, and finally it is the register. And my next in turn deduction for today's lecture is, having considered at least 4 sociolinguistic elements of the communicative situation, it is possible to define the register that is going to be used in this very situation, at this very place, and between these very people. And these constituents are the purpose, the status, the roles or role relations between 2 or more people, the place, and the register. And now we are going to contemplate on each of the offered components of the communicative situation. And the first one is the goal or the purpose of communication. So you can't fail to understand that any human activity, any speech activity is meaningful. We do something because we need it. We speak and we talk to somebody because also we need it. That means that we are socially determined to live together, and we are socially dependent on each other. So, and while living and breathing together, we perform different actions and perform them purposefully. What does it mean? Every minute and every day, we ask somebody to do something. We ask for information. We boast and we threaten somebody. We promise and swear. We inform and report. It happens every day. Thus, our communication is always purposeful or has its own goals. The amount of speech functions, that I can't enumerate all of them, is rather great, but it's not exceeding and it's not enormous. The amount of them is undoubtedly uncountable. So greeting, reporting, forgiving, etc. But anyway, they're countable. The next point is the place of communication. And you can open the file, okay, but a little bit later. Now I'll give my commentary first. Some scholars believe that the place of communication is unimportant. Actually, the amount of this sociolinguistic element is countless. Nobody can be sure beforehand where he or she can turn out to be in this or that very situation with these or with those people. So the places are quite countless in this life. And as I have said, some of the scholars suppose that the place of communication is unimportant. But now I'm going to demonstrate another video. Do you speak English? Okay. And please watch it and try to explain later, or I will help you to explain why it was not a successful communication. Okay? Watch.
Excuse me? Excuse me? Sorry, do you speak English?
No, I don't, sorry.
My car's broken down and I wondered if you could tell me where to find a garage.
Yeah, well, you know, that's wasted on me. I don't understand what you're saying.
You don't speak English at all?
Not a word, no. It's one of those things where I wish I paid more attention in school, but, excuse me, sorry. Do you speak any English? English? No. I don't know, I can't understand.
Hi, my car's broken down and I need to find a garage.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that at all.
Alright, well, thanks.
Tell you what, if you go down that way, about half a mile, there's a village. There might be somebody there that speaks English.
Ich speak ein bisschen Deutsch. Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Deutsch, nein. Sprichst du Deutsch?
Deutsch? Nur ein oder zwei Wörter, aber ich bin nicht fließend.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, sorry about that. Hey, you never know. Next time you're over, maybe we'll learn a bit of English for you.
Ja, oder Deutsch vielleicht.
Ja, das wäre toll.
I can speak English.
So, can you explain why it was a failure of communication?
Well, it was just a joke.
In general, right. It was a joke. But anyway, will you please return here in the slides, the beginning, the very beginning of the communication, here in slides, okay? Will you please find it? Look. Chaussée de Formay, and next I can't read French. So, what is the place of communication? Everything happens in France. According to these signs, it is absolutely clear that there are construction works in the road, and that the tourists can't lay out tents or camps nearby. And everything happens in France. Again, I'm trying to explain you. She has got a broken car, and she has a problem, and nobody is going to help her. Why? Being in France, speak French. Though I have said in the very beginning that every modern European citizen speaks not even two, 3, and even more European languages. But they just didn't want to help her, because she couldn't speak French to them. The idea of this, though anyway, they have tried to help her to go to a village where there were people who might help her. But they were not sure. By the way, they knew language so well that some of them has used Irish constructions, which I do adore, teaching language my second-year students. So, that's why we can say and we can assure that this constituent or element of a communicative situation is rather important. The next constituent part of a communicative situation is the social role of the speakers. And after courses in sociology or maybe psychology, you can remember that roles are occupied by individuals who are called actors. The social role is a set of connected behaviors, rights, obligations, beliefs, and norms conceptualized by actors in a social situation. Roles can be expected or free or continuously changing. Besides, the roles can be fixed forever, for example, a gender, or they can be prescribed. Imagine marriage. People can be single or married. So, prescribed roles. What is important, taking into consideration and taking into account the social role, is when individuals approve of any social role, they will have to follow the social norms of a certain society for the sake of a successful communication. When individuals disapprove of social roles, that means that they violate social norms, and they will have to be punished. But punished how? Some or none of them will communicate to them, and we have just seen it to some extent in the previous video. The next in turn constituent part of the social linguistic element of the communicative situation is the social status. In sociology and anthropology, social status is the honor or prestige attached to one's position in society. And here you are given also the plainest way to understand the social status. So it is the position of a person within the society. Statuses can be ascribed or achieved. One can earn their social status by their own achievements, and they're called achieved statuses. Achieved statuses are also connected with the professions, right? If I'm a teacher, it was me who did a lot to achieve this goal, right? But also, statuses can be ascribed. And if it is an ascribed status, it is connected with gender, age, race, ethnic group, or family background. Why family background? Because we are always, or we will be, daughters, parents, and sisters or brothers for the rest of our lives. But an absolutely logical question here to ask me, how people should differentiate between statuses and roles. And from my point of view, maybe there are other ways to differentiate between them, but it was our Russian sociolinguist, a modern sociolinguist, Leonid Petrovich Kresin, who tried to differentiate between the status and the role, and he offered these two questions, and the first one is relevant while deducing status, and the second question is necessary to define the social role of anybody. For example, what are you? Anyone can ask me. I am a teacher, it is my status. What are you doing now? I'm delivering a lecture, and this is also now, it is my role, the social role that I am performing. But my status, for example, in a minute won't change. But in a minute I can turn out to be somewhere in a shop or be a customer, or somewhere in a garage and be a client. So these are two questions. They're easy to remember and quite important to differentiate between these two elements of the communicative situation. And also, dwelling upon the status and the role, we all must understand that it is not one status or one role that we perform all our life. It is the system or the whole set of roles and statuses which we have to wear not to be punished during communications. The next slide is devoted to the relations, and usually the relations between people can be symmetrical and asymmetrical, a teacher and a student, an employer and an employee. Who else? Help me. So, many variants can be given here, and you see that but the main idea is that they can be symmetrical and asymmetrical. And at last, the register, a very important social-linguistic element of the communicative situation. While making research, I have found out that one of the first who attracted attention to the problem, not to the register, but to the problem of different levels of language use, was Mikhail Lomonosov. And searching the internet, you can find his Теория трех стилей and read about more this rather interesting idea. In sociolinguistics, the register, and you see it is a set of language forms used in a particular social situation. The number of registers is not immense. It's not big. And in different resources, you can read about register and comprehend that registers can be neutral, everyday, like, vulgar, amicable, ceremonial, public, ritual, or intimate. Some scholars emphasize that there are such registers as baby talk or the secondary baby talk. Baby talk is a register when grown-ups talk to small children. And as for the secondary baby talk, it is the register when young people talk to elderly people. Well, it's not always possible to teach all of those registers, right? And for the purposes of foreign language teaching, it was necessary to choose the most frequently used. And as they turned to be formal register, neutral, and informal. And now, coming to the conclusion practically, but not just right now, I would like to demonstrate how it is really possible to teach foreign language, taking into account the sociolinguistic competence. So first of all, you remember we teach students to speak, to listen to write, and what to read. And as for concerning speaking, we always remember any communication has a goal. We always speak and we pursue some goal, such as we want to inform somebody, we want to do what? To boast, to criticize somebody, and whatnot. And here I have found out the cliches in 3 different registers, giving the students or learning or teaching the students how to express approval. You see, the one and the same idea is given in different registers. The next step I offered my 9th form students is to read the situation or situations, and according to those 4 sociolinguistic factors of the communicative situation, try to identify the register. In Russian it also can be регистр or тональность общения. So, and if you look thoroughly at these, if you read through these situations, you will understand that the first one deals with the neutral register. The second one deals with the formal register. And the last one deals with the informal register. And in accordance with the previous slide, with the cliches in the previous slide, the students may express approval in 3 different registers. It is also important in the framework of sociolinguistics to remember such, maybe not element of the communicative situation, but anyway, such factor as gender. Gender certainly is very important, and it's not necessary for me to explain that women and men speak differently. But as it turned out, there are no male languages and female languages, and that's why we came to a conclusion that it isn't possible to include gender as a part of a communicative situation. But anyway, look at the next slide, and I think it is quite interesting to understand how men and women speak differently. So, women are more cooperative. Women talk more about trivial topics than men. Women usually don't tell jokes. Women use more correct grammar. Women are more standard in speaking, and more standard in speaking manner, but emotional. So women are more polite. Women use more adjectives such as charming, nice, etc. Women use more tag questions than men. And also, women use more rising intonation in statements, signaling their uncertainty. And women use more intensifiers as men. And there, very, extremely, absolutely, you can add more, can you?
Certainly, without a doubt.
And there, and here they are. So, during this lecture, I have practically finished. I have tried to explain you what the sociolinguistic competence is. And my last deduction is the sociolinguistic competence is the ability of an individual that can be taught at secondary school. And to make conclusions, I would like to repeat all my deductions for today. Thank you for your attention. You've been most helpful and really encouraging. If you want to contact my addresses, email addresses here and the telephone number. Thank you for cooperation.
Thank you.